Myers, 8. World War III versus World War I, 12 years and 5 months after Longview. 10 soldiers wisely led will beat 100 without a head. Euripides. The Northwest American Republic's government had long pondered how best to establish a war room to respond to any existential threat. The problem was that any such locale would be an obvious priority target for an enemy strike, with the subsequent risk of decapitating the NAR's defense command. The government vetoed suggestions regarding a bunker because of its obvious negative historical connotations for National Socialists. In the long run, the Northwest military decided that the best defense was to have as little centralization as possible, and to train every unit in the Northwest Defense Force to function independently within certain overall strategic parameters, right down to the squad level. Every Northwest soldier, sailor, and airman knew his part of the overall war plan, the latest version being Plan 17. If they were cut off from command, they would do their best to implement it with whatever came to hand. The NDF had a number of tricks up its sleeve to maintain command communications during an invasion, but it would not set up that one single head that might be cut off. The United States had never been able to defeat the Afghan freedom fighters, in part because there was never any head to cut off. The Taliban's command structure consisted of nothing more than a couple of bearded old men sitting on mats drinking tea in a hut somewhere in the mountains. The NDF was more technologically advanced, but it aimed for the same effect. Until the enemy bombs actually started falling, though, a special war cabinet group had been established. It met regularly in the Capitol building in Olympia, at Fort Lewis, or at various military installations. This special inner circle consisted of the state president, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Security, the NDF Chief of Staff, and the heads of service from the Army, the Kriegsmarine, and the Luftwaffe, plus whatever other ministers of state, military officers, or specialists needed to be included. In late March, there was one such meeting at the Air Defense Command in Centralia, Washington. It actually did take place in a bunker, one which had been built in order to monitor test launches of the Republic's rocket-propelled V-3 flying bombs. The meeting site had been chosen because it contained a small guest lounge inside it that looked like somebody's oak-paneled basement rec room, with a working fireplace. The Northwest in late March was still cold and wet. This afternoon, the officers' mess had sent round a large tray of sandwiches and an urn of coffee, and 8 men sat on sofas and armchairs in a haze of smoke that would have gotten all 8 of the participants severe prison time in the United States, since tobacco was completely prohibited now in the land of the free and the home of the brave. In addition to Morgan, Leach, and Basquine, there was President Henry Red Morehouse, Security Minister Frank Barrow, who was the longest-serving cabinet minister in the same position, Defense Minister Carter Wingfield, the General of the Army, Billy Jackson, and Colonel Jeffrey Garrison from Combined Military Intelligence. "How's it looking?" asked Red Morehouse hopefully, opening the meeting in mid-munch. "Any chance we've misread the signs, that we're just paranoid and overreacting about all this?" "I'm afraid I still have to agree with Colonel Garrison's assessment, Red," said John Corbett Morgan grimly. "Looks like this time they really are coming." "Well, we all knew that someday they would," said Morehouse sadly. "And yet somehow I'd always hoped against hope." "God damn them all to hell!" he suddenly shouted angrily. There was a short silence. "I apologize, gentlemen. That wasn't helpful. Tell me what we know so far." "We have a name, Mr. President," said Colonel Garrison. "They call it Operation Strikeout. They don't see the obvious double edge in that?" asked Morehouse with a grim chuckle. "What if they're the ones who strike out?" "They seem confident they won't, sir," said Garrison soberly. "Yeah, they're confident, all right," confirmed Morgan. "Goddamned arrogant, in fact. Well, they always were. The tech warfare boys are now hacking and tapping every satellite and computer server they can. We're accumulating a massive ground-level intelligence, off-field agents from both CMI and WPB, and they all tell the same story. This is it. We just don't know exactly when and exactly how, although a very nasty picture is shaping up. Garrison nodded. Training and preparation at a dozen bases from Fort Bragg to Fort Sam Houston, from Fort Riley to Huachuca and Castillo del Pueblo in Aztlan, a number of small and apparently insignificant troop movements on various pretexts that always seemed to slide in a general northwesterly direction. Materials and supplies and support services being moved and concentrated in certain areas. Big consignments of weapons and ammo and equipment churned out of the defense contracting factories and vendors. Gasoline and diesel fuel being stockpiled. All kinds of secret meetings and coded communications and lights burning late in the Pentagon and across Washington, D.C., in both the literal and figurative sense. A whole pattern of activity that can't be explained away. Stuff they really seem to be trying to keep secret, like the degree to which they're beefing up the Canadian highway system parallel to the NAR border. They're now using the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to stay on schedule with the construction, with the men dressed in tattered civvy overalls and all their bulldozers and vehicles painted bright fire engine red. Trying to pretend they're ordinary Canadian road crews, eh? How many troops do they figure to move through Canada against us, and where do we think they'll strike south? Asked Billy Basquine. We figure at least 150,000, sir, replied Garrison. 3 full Army Corps, including at least 2 armored divisions, and 1 airborne division to jump in ahead of them and secure key points in the Kalispell and the northern Idaho Panhandle area. Then once their beachheads are secure, they'll move south to Boise or west to Spokane. Do they really think they fooling us? Asked Morehouse, shaking his head in wonder. Frank, are you getting any chatter from La Cesspool Grande that indicates just what the hell they think they're doing? Why now? Why not 10 years ago when we were newborn and couldn't possibly have defended ourselves against a full-scale invasion? A number of factors were in play back then, said Barrow. The United States was in utter turmoil, remember, reeling from defeat after defeat. First there was the violent loss of the Northwest, then the quasi-legal loss of the Southwest when Chelsea folded like a lawn chair in exchange for the votes of 6 Hispanic senators in her impeachment trial, then the loss of their oil empire, and finally the loss of the very fly-blown jewel in Zion's crown itself, the so-called Second Holocaust when Israel went down. Plus, they lost the only really strong leader they had, Hillary Clinton, when our guys went all loup-garou in that hotel in Denver. The sea hag's sudden demise left America rudderless for a while, which was good for us. It's taken Wallace almost 8 full years to get the country stabilized and returned to some semblance of normality. The American military was in even more terrible shape than some of us remember it back in the day when we were kicking doors into Crete or chasing Mad Maxes in Libya or whatever we all did, continued Barrow. It took time for the USA to pull itself together, and let's give him his due. That nutless wonder Hunter Wallace managed to give it more than a lick and a promise. Through a razzle-dazzle combination of charisma, bribery, and backstabbing, Wallace's one nation indivisible movement and his so-called national unity government have gotten all the other American shitheads from across the spectrum, everybody from the Delmar Apartment Society on the neocon, right to Hillary's heirs on the loony liberal left, to pull together in their common interest and make sure the United States of America didn't completely fall apart as it most likely would have if left to its own devices. Now Wallace wants re-election. He's already had his 2 regular terms, and he'll get his congressional resolution suspending the 22nd Amendment, just like Hillary did. He's pulled the country away from the brink, and what's left of the USA has now returned to a faint semblance of the old time of abundance, with massive inflation. True, but at least good enough to keep up appearances. It won't last, though, and Wallace knows it. America still doesn't manufacture hardly anything it needs, nobody has any real jobs anymore, and the US dollar is now essentially worthless because the regime keeps the printing presses over at the Federal Reserve running night and day. Inflation in the USA is starting to approach Zimbabwe standards. His mortgage moratorium, which the pasty little bastard copied from us, by the way, wrecked the banks to the point where he had to pump them up with the Federal Reserve's printing presses for the umpteenth time. Now gas is $21 a gallon in the States, and a loaf of bread is $14. Wallace saved a lot of people's homes by shit-canning their crushing mortgages, true. But in most of those homes these days, the fridge is empty. Even if meat wasn't banned now in the States, nobody could afford a pound of hamburger in inflated dollars. The economy is set to crash again, worse than it did in 2009, and it could happen any time now. Wallace urgently needs a rabbit to pull out of a hat, and it's time he fulfilled his last and ultimate campaign promise, recovering the lost states of the Northwest, so people will be so busy cheering that they won't notice the fact that the American economy is finally, at long last, about to go down for the count. He needs to do it before the ONI convention in August, or at least look like he's doing it, with an ongoing military campaign. Add to that the presence of 3 million Israeli Jews who have all been given automatic citizenship right off the jumbo jet from the burning ruins of Tel Aviv, and who are screaming for revenge. And I think we can see why he's decided to go ahead and make his move. John, what kind of preparations are they making now that we know of? Asked Carter Wingfield. The 1,000 or so Chinese helicopters that they slipped into Aslan, or tried to slip into Aslan without our knowing about it, are now being dispersed all over the northern counties of California and Nevada to small airfields and forward military bases they may think we don't know about, said Morgan. Those Taipans have a long range, and they can strike pretty much anywhere up and down the western seaboard and most of the eastern interior as well. Worse still, we have received confirmation that at least 6 American aircraft carriers and their escorts of destroyers and frigates are now converging on the west coast of North America, out of their bases in Hawaii, or coming up from the Panama Canal, ultimate destination unknown. Our crystal ball boys like Jeff here think they'll be assembled into a naval task force and then head north. Christ, it's not going to be a seaborne invasion, is it? Asked Morehouse. They planning on hitting us from every angle? Maybe we ought to put Zach Hatfield on coastal defense and see if he can pull off another Battle of Sunset Beach, said General Billy Jackson with a smile. No, the Americans don't have the troops for that, Mr. President, said Colonel Jeffrey Garrison. Remember back 12 years ago, when Chelsea Clinton was facing impeachment after Longview? One of the trade-offs she was forced to make to survive, in addition to agreeing to the establishment of Aslan, was that the United States abolish the draft for the second time since World War II. It was a politically popular move, and also an astute one. The simple fact is that the United States of America is a society that no longer dares to conscript an army. They don't let civilians have guns anymore. And the power elite aren't too thrilled with the idea of millions of draftees of all colors and weirded-out mindsets learning to use them. Too many of the patchwork of minority and special interest groups they have to draw on are of dubious loyalty. They don't trust white conscripts because they might be secretly sympathetic to the Northwest Republic. They don't trust Hispanic draftees because they were probably secretly loyal to Aslan. And they don't trust the blacks because nobody trusts niggers with guns, just on general principles. The upshot of it is that we're facing an enemy military which is much smaller than it was 20 years ago at the height of the oil empire. Higher quality and better trained to be sure, but at least they can't overrun us with a mass horde of 20 million cannon fodder like they were Persians or Chinese. We believe that the entire American combined invasion force will number somewhere around 400,000 men, including the Naval Attack Group and their Air Force. And in addition, there may be as many as 500,000 Mexicans attacking from California and Nevada in the south. But the Hispanic troops are very much inferior by way of arms and training and morale. That's still almost 1 million men invading our country. Any possibility of active Canadian participation? Asked Wingfield. Maybe, but their army has never been that big, and they may try and sit this one out until we counterattack into Canada, said Garrison. On the upside, I think there's no question that we can win this. For one thing, during the first stages of the war, we're fighting defensively on interior lines, and the perceived wisdom is that an attacking force needs to outnumber the defenders by at least 4-1 to have any hope of success. Either that or have some extreme technical or logistic advantage, which with the Americans for the past century has traditionally been overwhelming air superiority. If blue light pans out, the Americans will lose that in the first 40 to 8 hours. On our side, the population of the Republic is now up to around 21 million people, many of them refugees from the United States and other politically correct countries who remember what life under PC was like, and who understand what it will mean for them and their families if we're conquered. The Republic is a nation of soldiers. If we mobilize our entire active reserve and everybody who can hold a rifle, from the Civil Guard to the B Specials to the young pioneers, we can field almost 5 million combatants. We'll have the bastards outnumbered, and we'll be on interior lines. And they will have almost all the high-tech weapons systems and gadgets, like we've never been able to afford to acquire, sighed Carter Wingfield. If blue light can't bring down those damned jets from where they hide in the sky at 30,000 feet, then it will be World War III against World War I. They will be counting on their high-tech toys to give them the edge, yes, sir, agreed Garrison. But remember, we have some tricks up our own sleeve, like rot fungus and blue light, and I'm convinced both of them will work. We have the sunburn missiles to deal with their naval assault force. Plus, we have enough V3 seconds to drop some nasty choky stuff on California that will disincentivize the beaners real quick. Not to mention the fact that the people of the Northwest Republic have lived free and white for over a decade now, and they've acquired a taste for it. I know part of General Barrow's remit as security minister is to keep track of the national mood for the government, and I don't know what he will say, but my guess is that the Americans will find themselves invading a very large country with a well-armed and very pissed-off population who will fight to the death rather than return to the slavery and the poison that was the United States. I don't mean to go all mystical on you here, gentlemen, but this will be a war of the human spirit against the machine, and I'm just mushy enough to believe the human spirit will triumph. It's going to be a bloody mess, comrades, but we're going to win. Unless that lunatic Wallace decides to nuke us when he sees he's losing, said Leach sourly. Or unless the Qingling Dings decide to send something more than helicopter and jet fighter pilots, said Basquine. Any chance the Chinese might try to get involved with a major ground force commitment? Asked Morehouse. No chance, Red, we're certain of that, Barrow told the group. For one thing, the Celestials may be inscrutable, but they aren't stupid. They saw how America got bogged down in foreign conquests when they went into lands where they were never meant to be, and they don't want the same thing happening to them. Nor do the enemy want them here. The Triple Alliance of America, Canada, and Aztlan, as we have named them, think they can take us on their own, and none of their governments are nutty enough to invite a major Chinese ground force into North America. They know once that happens, they'll never be able to get rid of the Chinks. They remember what happened when America kept invading Muslim countries and staying for decades on end. So why the Naval Task Force if not to invade? Asked Morehouse. Air support from the carriers for the three-pronged ground invasion we think is coming, to try and destroy our manufacturing. And infrastructure and population centers along the old I-5 corridor, replied Morgan. Looks like they'll be sending troops against us from Aztlan in the south, from the east through Montana towards Missoula, and from Canada in the north, down into Idaho or Montana, or both. Plus airborne drops all over the country on the first day to secure crucial points. Not go long and slash straight down from Vancouver towards Seattle? Asked Morehouse. The would seem to be a logical fourth prong to an invasion. We don't think so, sir, said Garrison. For one thing, they simply don't have enough combat troops. For another, they're afraid we will retaliate against Vancouver. Prime Minister Simoneau is very twitchy about that possibility. The tell on this is that they're not rebuilding and reinforcing the roads all the way into BC. Our prognostication at the moment is they will concentrate their naval air assault on Seattle and Portland and points west of the Cascade Mountains to try and bomb us back into the Stone Age, as they like to put it. And the northernmost strike force will cut down east of the mountains towards Coeur d'Alene and Kalispell, then maybe try and do some kind of convergence with the eastern invasion force against Boise. Why not Wyoming first? Asked Leach. We think that will come in the second wave, so to speak, once hostilities have begun, said Morgan. Wyoming has always been the Republic's hinterland, our own odd man out, kind of a frontier preserve. Very hard, old-fashioned and independent people. The party minds its own business out there, and they tolerate the tricolor over the post offices, that kind of live and let live thing. Wyoming folks understand the need for national service perfectly. They agree with it as good for young people's character, and we've had less trouble with draft dodging out of Wyoming than anywhere else. But beyond that, we've walked softly out there and let the cowboys roam the range, and I think we'll find that will pay off now that trouble's coming. The cowboys don't want to go back to the bad old days any more than anyone else in this country does. As to the invasion, Wyoming sort of juts out there on the map, and it looks like a vulnerable appendage that can be severed from the Republic, true, but our wargamers believe that for the Americans to concentrate a major initial attack on Wyoming would be a mistake, and they understand that. They don't want to lop off a limb, they need to go for the vitals right away. It's a big place with an implacably hostile population and terrain that make it ideal for guerrilla warfare, almost like America's Afghanistan. It would be very easy for the first wave invasion force to get bogged down out on those plains, far from any of their major objectives. Trying to come through Wyoming would increase the distance they have to travel to reach the major eastern cities. Most likely they'll try to roll up Wyoming in a second wave of less than frontline troops, maybe use National Guard and these Operation Chain Link baboons, once they've captured their major objectives elsewhere in the country. President Morehouse spoke. Getting back to naval defense, Admiral Leach, can we do anything about this American armada that will be coming in at us from the Pacific? Depends on how far out to sea the carriers are when they launch their aircraft, Mr. President, said Leach. My guess is that will be 50 miles at least. They're leery of our shore batteries. Our Russian friends have given us enough Yakont's missiles on mobile launchers to make them skittish. We can and we will try and get at them with our missile destroyers, with tack boats and U-boats and punchies and everything else we've got. But even with our souped-up marine engine technology, sea travel is a lot slower than air, and they'll know we're coming. Our Navy will have to slug it out with their ship-based copter gunships and Dodge surface-to-surface missiles. And once we get close, there's the chain guns and computer-directed guns that can hit anything on the surface with pinpoint accuracy. Fortunately, we've spent the past 12 years concentrating on quantity rather than quality. So while we don't have any battleships or carriers or much of any kind of a blue water fleet, we've got 6 sunburn-packing missile destroyers, over 200 tacks, 54 U-boats, and about 80 punchies. Punchies? Asked Jackson. Small, fast hydroplane boats carrying a 3-man crew, and one stubby little Nova missile with an effective range of 5 miles that can breach up to 18 inches of armor plate and hit with a concussion that can also blow out the watertight compartments on most known vessels, including, in my opinion, an aircraft carrier if they hit her in the right place, explained Leach. Kind of a nautical version of the old NVA shoot and scoot. Zip in, slam a missile into the enemy's side, zip out, back to base or the supply vessel and load another missile. Repeat. They're light and very fast, and if only a few of them can get close enough, they can wreak havoc. Get a good square hit on the waterline of a destroyer or even a frigate with one of those Novas, and she's off to Davy Jones's locker in 10 minutes. Trouble is getting close enough. Their hulls are mostly fiberglass, and they're unarmored. We deliberately sacrificed everything to speed and mobility in that one hellacious punch, hence the nickname. Plus, their range is short. They're purely for coastal defense against just this kind of situation. But we really need for the enemy fleet to get in as close as we can lure them, to cut the time and distance necessary to deploy our vessels. Sounds like what we've done with the Songbirds and Starfighters, commented Basquine. Don't even worry about standing up to the big boys on the block, just a lot of small craft that can move fast, hit hard, and then escape and evade. Can the tack boats take down a carrier? The torpedo assault craft? Absolutely, once again with the proviso that they can get within effective range, Leach assured them. That's the rub. Depending on how many jets and helicopter gunships the Luftwaffe can let us have, we will have some air cover against enemy copters. But we know you're going to be stretched thin, Billy. And there's just not too much we can do about missiles and fighter jet attacks. Mr. President, the best contingency plan we have been able to come up with for a scenario like this is to let the enemy fleet get as close as possible to our shore, then we swarm them like a pack of piranhas, all of us, so that we will overwhelm their radar and chain guns and missile defenses, and at least some of us can get close enough to stop them. We have the firepower to sink those ships, if we can just bring it to them. Piranhas are small, but they have very sharp teeth, and enough of them can strip a man or a cow to the bone. One mass suicide mission and then that's our whole Navy gone? Demanded Morehouse in horror. If that's what it takes to stop those carriers from launching bombing missions against our cities and our children. Yes, sir, said Leach. There will be no Hamburgs or Dresdens here, Mr. President. General Basquine, will the Songbirds conceivably be any good against the carriers? Asked Morehouse. Sir, the Songbirds are tactical ground support aircraft, tank killers and anti-transport hunters, said Basquine. Their purpose is to make sure any enemy army invading the Northwest Republic does so on foot after the first 48 hours or so. They're prop jobs, since we could never afford any significant number of jets, based on the old German Stuka but twin-engined, plus some refinements of 21st century technology we've added. The Songbirds are fast as hell from the viewpoint of anybody on the ground, but slow as molasses to a computerized radar fire control system. They're very maneuverable, which is good for dodging ground fire and evading enemy radar, but I have to recommend against sending them on long flights over the ocean, where there is no place to hide and no place to evade radar and satellite surveillance. In fact, if rot fungus can't take out the enemy satellite system, then we're going to be royally screwed. The Songbirds are nimble when flying low to the ground, like I said, but they're still tortoises compared to F-15 seconds or F-22 seconds, and they can be easily tracked from space. Like Admiral Leach's missile and torpedo boats, range and armor were sacrificed to speed and maneuverability in one big punch. Our Valkyrie helicopter gunships we must have to slow the enemy ground advance. The Republic will be fighting on 3 huge fronts, and there simply aren't enough of the ladies for that, never mind a pitched battle at sea where they will be knocked out of the air like pigeons by computer-controlled chain guns. Okay, now we get down to the nitty-gritty, said President Morehouse. Our 3, we hope to held their secret weapons. First off, how does it look on rot fungus, John? Morgan nodded. Technical Warfare Division and Doc Doom himself assure me it can be done, that the virus will work and it will take out the entire American, Chinese, Japanese, European, and old Israeli spy satellite system all at once, and about half the world's communications along with it, plus fucking up their ground control. Servers like a dog's dinner. That will leave only the Russian orbital communications network intact, as well as our own few Lazarus birds. So we cross our fingers and hope that Big Bear decides to stay mellow, and not sell us out to whatever desperate and extravagant deal the Americans offer them for use of their eyes in the sky. But it's kind of like swallowing gasoline and a lit match and blowing yourself up. Spectacular trick, but we can only do it once. Any attempt at a test run for rot fungus beforehand will alert the Americans to the fact that we have the virus, and their cyber geeks will have time to work up countermeasures. Not to mention the fact that if the Russians won't allow us access to their satellites, we will be almost as blind as the Americans even with our handful of Lazarus birds, said Morehouse with a sigh. Will Moscow dare to take our side openly? Asked Jackson. Big Bear has been of immense help over the past 12 years, for which they have been well compensated in Northwest paper and pulp, Northwest manufactured products, Northwest booze, Northwest marijuana, and Northwest meat and grain, which they have then sold on to other countries to maintain their position as a food producer, said Morehouse. To what degree all of those things earn U.S. actual military assistance in a time of existential crisis has always been a very obscure point, which we have been unable to get the Bear to clarify. Why not take down every damn satellite in the sky, no matter who it belongs to, rather than let anyone use it against us? Asked Leach. That idea has been floated, Admiral. We may have to go that route if it looks as if our Russian friends are turning two-faced on us, but Russia was the first country to recognize us out of only 4 in the whole world to do so thus far. They have been of serious material help to us and comported themselves as friends, and I don't think we need to kick them in the balls without provocation. The Republic will need all the friends we can get. Now for the most important maybe of all. Carter, what's the story on blue light? Same as rot fungus, said Wingfield. Joe Cord assures me it will work like a charm, but then a man who habitually refers to God as an esteemed senior colleague doesn't strike me as having a too pragmatic point of view. Yes, I know. Dr. Cord's ego tends to cast Mount Rainier in the shade on sunny days, responded Morehouse dryly. Well, he did at least refer to the Almighty as a senior colleague, replied Wingfield sourly. To give Cord due credit, there's no question that the blue light plasma weapon works, and it will bring down an aircraft. It works in the lab, and the prototypes worked in the few tests we've been able to do out in the Olympic on propeller-driven drones, on nice cloudy days when we hoped to hell the satellites couldn't pick up on what we were doing. But short of bringing down an Air Northwest liner, we've never been able to test it out on jets at high altitude. The tracking and fire control unit works on the simulator. As risky as it is, we've fired a few test beams into the stratosphere, and the instrumentation shows they can reach 45,000 feet with only a 10% power loss, which will destroy any plane or missile the Americans can throw at us like a mosquito in a bug zapper, if only we can hit the damned things. But you're talking about hitting an aircraft moving miles above the Earth at anything up to twice the speed of sound, probably doing evasive maneuvers and possibly equipped with stealth radar cloaking, with a plasma particle beam the diameter of a pencil. The key is the radar tracking and targeting unit. Does it work? The only way we'll know is when these bastards make their move. If the bombs fall on us, then it didn't work. Won't the American plane's onboard defenses lock onto the blue light's radar signal and hit the unit with a missile? Asked Jackson. That's why each battery consists of 3 projectors mounted on separate vehicles, explained Wingfield. 1 to fire on the attacking aircraft, 1 to take out retaliatory missiles, and a 3rd weapon as backup to either one as needed. How many batteries are ready for the field? Asked Morehouse. 200 or so, said Wingfield. Just barely enough to cover our major urban areas and other potential targets. If we really do have until June, we can double that number by then with our crash program. Air Defense is starting the next training intake tomorrow, in fact, right here in Centralia, put in General Basquine. All hand-picked men who will be confined to base until they're through, and they have been deployed to Army and Luftwaffe posts around the country, ready to roll when we get the word that the balloon has gone up. Keep me posted down to the last detail, Bill, said Morehouse. Finally, the V3 seconds and the gas and bio warheads, Olean, Lakeview, Cave Junction, and Siskiyou, have about 100 Type 1 V3 seconds each, and can fit phosgene, mustard gas, or sarin warheads on your order, Mr. President, as well as a small number of anthrax warheads, said Carter Wingfield. Plus a simple He warhead loaded with Semtex. You can cram a lot of Semtex into a 1,000-kilogram warhead if all you want to do is make a big hole in the ground in Sacramento. They need at least 24 hours notice so they can get the warheads fitted and prepare the platforms for firing. For much the same reasons as apply to the Naval and Air Forces, that is overwhelming them with low-tech in sheer numbers before they can get their high-tech toys focused. I recommend that once the invasion commences, you order an immediate launch of all the rockets from those 4 platforms I just named. Type 1s are relatively simple, and by the standards of most modern weapon systems, they're affordable to manufacture, given our military budget at least. But they're slow and vulnerable. The mechs have no air defense system worthy of the name, but we have to assume that the Americans or the Chinese will give them some kind of cover, possibly from that naval fleet offshore, Patriots or some other kind of anti-aircraft system, or F-15 and F-22 jet fighters that could knock the V3 seconds down out of the sky like badminton birds. A mass launch would mean more chance that enough will get through to cause serious enemy casualties. Another reason is that those stations are right down on the border, to get as close to their targets as possible, and if the Aztecs move fast enough, they will be overrun pretty quickly. The main base at Crater Lake has over 500 rockets, including 112 Type 2s which can hit Los Angeles. These people are coming to destroy our nation and kill and enslave our children, said Morehouse. We have done nothing to them except demand the right to live among our own kind in our own land, the same demand they themselves made of the United States 12 years ago. But they refuse to accord us the same right. They want to take what we have, and that has been going on for way too long already. So they're going to suffer. These weapons won't be decisive. Hell, we can't even hit any substantial non-white target in the United States with them. Their range is so short and they're so inaccurate. But they will make sure that if this republic perishes from the earth, we will take a lot of mestizos with us, and if we survive, we will make an example that will deter them from ever trying anything like this again. I know there are whites remaining in California as well, but if they're still there after 12 years, and they have not come to our own racial homeland, then I assume they're nothing but liberal shits who love diversity so much they can damned well die in it. The minute the first Mexican soldier sets foot across that border, I'm giving the order. Each forward-firing base will lay half their weapons on San Francisco, so we can eradicate as many bugger boys as possible in addition to mestizos, and the other half will drop on Sacramento, so we can hopefully take out as much of their government as we can, including those fucking white traitor politicians in the Partida Criollo. All the Type 2s from Crater Lake head for Los Angeles. And never mind niggers in Compton or mestizos in East LA, they're just cockroaches and their species is immortal. We'll never get rid of them all. Insofar as the V3s can be aimed, which I understand isn't very accurately, I want them aimed at Hollywood, Malibu, Santa Monica, Brentwood, Beverly Hills, and Fairfax, so we can take out as many goddamned movie stars and Israelis and general Jews as we can. Carter, you and General Basquine come and see me tomorrow at 11 a.m., and we will work out the exact firing and targeting protocol. I also want to see if we can double our stock of both classes of V3 flying bombs by D-Day and set up a couple of more forward-firing platforms, maybe even with some Type 2s so we can drop a little death on Fresno and San Diego as well. After the meeting broke up, Morehouse indicated to Frank Barrow that he should stay behind. Frank, is there anything new on Operation Belladonna? The president asked. I spoke to Charlie this morning before I came down, said Barrow. The special handler his section recruited has completed his crash course at SOI, and he's in Missoula now, conferring with the girl's family, the ones who remained in the Republic after Longview. They've agreed to cooperate and assist in the first contact. The special op has been provided with everything he needs by way of documents, and he'll be leaving for La Cesspool Grande tomorrow, although it will take him a few days' travel time to get him to the place they've selected for him to pop onto the American grid in order to fit in with his cover identity. Once there, the DC station chief will brief him. He will probably try to make initial contact in 5 or 6 days. I hope this works out, sighed Morehouse, shaking his head. There is still so much we don't know, and most of it we can only get from somebody who is deep, deep inside the belly of the beast. Most important of all, when the hell are they going to hit us? We have to know in time to make sure we can get all the reservists mobilized and get the blue light batteries in place and 100 other things we can't do until we have confirmation, so we can kick in Plan 17. 48 hours, Frank, that's all I ask, 48 hours notice. God has given us so much in the past 17 years, since that day they came for Gus Singer and his children and white men finally got up off their knees. Is it too much to ask for one more sign of his favor? 48 hours? That night in Missoula, Lieutenant Robert Campbell Jr. sat down to the dinner table at his in-laws' home on Randall Street in East Missoula. It was a quiet and somber affair. The family knew that Bob was leaving the next day for an undisclosed location for an indeterminate period of time, and that he would be out of contact for the duration of that time. They knew it was something serious, but that was all. His mother-in-law, Lorna, just thought it was a work thing for the guard, some kind of secret investigation. Robert was content to make that the official story, but he wasn't fooling anyone else. Bob was lucky he had been able to come back for a brief visit at all. The original plan was that he was to be shipped right out after he got through at the School of Intelligence on Whidbey Island. At the last minute, it had been decided to clue Clancy and Kevin Myers into what was going on, so that they could give Bob personal messages he could deliver to Georgia when they met, adding to his credibility and persuasive power. Bob was glad he could bring the Myers men in on it, since he not only felt the loss of his childhood friend Peanut almost as keenly as they did, but he owed the professor a big favor. It was at the university that he had met his future wife, courtesy of Clancy Myers. 8 years before, Bob had been a 19-year-old national serviceman, just out of the School of Infantry at Fort Matthews, sporting full corporal stripes indicating he had maxed out the course. He was home on a week's leave before reporting to his permanent unit at the Oroville border crossing into Canada, where he would spend the next 16 months assisting fleeing migrants trying to come home, hunting down infiltrators coming in to spy and to plant landmines, and getting gloriously drunk in the NCO's mess. Like most young men in a uniform, Robert wanted to show it off, and so he had swaggered over to the university to see his brother-in-law, the Chancellor Jason Stockdale, and his old friend Dr. Clancy Myers. Kevin Myers, being almost a year younger, was just starting his own military training at Fort Lewis himself, and so was absent that day. Jason and Jason's wife, Bob's sister Jennifer, had treated him to lunch in the faculty lounge and introduced him around to some new faces he didn't know. And then he had dropped around to Clancy Myers' office to say hello. Clancy was now head of the Combined Culture and Literature Department, which included the study of all the great writers and philosophers and poets of the Western canon and heritage. He supervised a staff of over 60 academics and their teaching assistants, taught 2 courses himself, and was always ready to sub in the classroom any time another professor was ill or otherwise unavailable. Immersing himself in his work had been his way of dealing with his daughter's loss. Bob was seated in Clancy's office going over the usual stock and trade tales of basic training and military daring-do with the older man when the door opened, and in walked a young goddess, short and voluptuous, with a single blonde braid down her back, wearing a long, flowing blue velvet dress. She was bearing a stack of file folders like they were garlands to be laid reverently on a smoking altar in a forest glade, instead of plopped into a middle-aged egghead's in-basket. Robert had leaped to his feet before the girl even looked at him, and when she turned, her ringed eyes of crystalline blue on him, Robert only barely managed to shut his gaping mouth in time. Then he stared desperately at Clancy. It had only been 4 years since the revolution, but already Moras in the Republic were changing due to a combination of subtle and not-so-subtle pressure and indoctrination from the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry of Education, and also because of a nearly instinctive desire on the part of the people to get back to the older and better ways in every aspect of life. In the old American days, Robert would have practically chased the girl down the corridor gabbling every suggestive and flirtatious pickup line in his repertoire, although actual touching would not have been allowed at that point due to considerations of political correctness. Depending on how she felt inclined toward her new admirer, she would either have responded with more of the same, implying that a squelched session in the near future was a distinct possibility, or else if not, she would have blown him off in the language of a nigger bitch. Throw in some crack and negroid hip-hop and raunchy tattoos, and that was the way such things were done in America. But already social mores in the Northwest Republic were changing, going backward with amazing speed, as a whole people desperately tried to climb back on board the ship from which they had been hurled by Jews generations before. It was now understood by young men and women of their age that they were civilized white people, and not negroid animals in heat. Certain ancient courtship rituals were now once again required, such as an actual introduction, before the dance could begin. Simply walking up to a girl on the street or in the halls of a university and trying to force an acquaintance now came under the quaint, archaic description of an unwelcome advance, or even the century-old guys and dolls term of a mash. It invited a slap from the young lady or a physical assault from any nearby male relative. It also marked the young man who attempted it as a boorish wigger, and probably ruined his chances with the girl for good. Without an introduction, Robert was screwed at the starting gate. Robert stood to attention, cleared his throat, and barely restrained himself from yelling at Clancy to be introduced. The girl was lingering and she didn't seem averse, but they could hardly stand there like statues for minute after minute. Clancy stared back at Robert owlishly, puzzled as to what he wanted, and then he glanced at the girl and it hit him. Oh, of course, where are my manners? Millie, this is Corporal Robert Campbell of the Defense Force, 4th Infantry Brigade up at Oroville, or he will be. Robert, this is Millie, one of my part-time admin assistants from the high school. She graduates in June, and she'll be doing her labor service here at, along with night school for a teaching degree. And so she's getting a head start on things now, after school.
I'm pleased to meet you, Miss Millicent,
said Robert, ridiculously trying to sound like Rhett Butler. It's Malata, said the girl in a firm, pleasing contralto voice. Malata Horokova. It's Czech. My family is from Chicago, and before that from Bohemia. We came home in the year after Longview. The girl extended her hand, which Robert took. Hand-kissing wasn't on the Ministry of Culture's cards yet, so he merely gave it a quick, firm clasp. Clancy took in the situation at a glance. Millie, I think you're done for the afternoon. She wasn't, but all three of them got it. You can clock out now. I need to get going myself, Dr. Myers, said Bob. Have you got a car, Miss Horokova? Many people in the Republic didn't anymore. Not only was the fuel situation still a little dodgy, but there was no longer any need for them in any city or town because there was now safe, clean, efficient, and nigger-free public transport. If not, I would be happy to give you a ride home. Thank you, Corporal Campbell, she said demurely. Let me clock out and get my coat. I'll be back in a minute. After she had left, Clancy said, So far as I know, she's unattached, but she brought her family to our Independence Day bash last October, and I should warn you that she had a father and a brother both the size of tanks on either side of her. I get the impression that trifling with that young lady's affections is rather high on life's not recommended list. I seem to recall hearing somewhere that they had a rough time with their homecoming. Had to run the border with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Other than that caveat, lay on, MC Duff, and damned be he who first cries hold enough. Before the week was out, Bob had secured Millie's permission to write to her from Oroville, since good old-fashioned letters were once again coming into widespread use in the absence of a nationwide internet email system, which would be vulnerable to monitoring and hacking by the Republic's multifarious enemies. After several months of billets due, on his next leave, Robert was formally brought before the family for inspection. Eli and Ed liked the cut of his jib, and the rest was history. Tonight at dinner, Eli and Ed Horokova were grim and Millie was restrained. Even the children had caught wind of something going on in the outer world of the adults. Bobby 3, Bob and Millie's 5-year-old son, stared at his father and his mother with big eyes, rather than his more normal practice of stuffing too much food in his mouth and pelting his 3-year-old sister with peas when he thought no one was looking. Ida herself was just out of the high chair, seated on a plastic box topped with a cushion so she could reach the table. She wasn't eating much, just kneading mashed potatoes with her fingers. Bob broke the silence by engaging their Horokova cousins, Ed and Jeanette's brood, with questions and comments about school, and 8-year-old Stan's first marksmanship competition with air rifles. You'll be shooting for the Pioneers in the National Stash, Bob told him with a smile. I can't join the Pioneers until I'm 10, said Stanislaus. After dinner, Lorna and Jeanette took the children next door to Ed's house to watch Cappy the Kike cartoons on disc. "You went to see Kevin and Clancy Myers this afternoon," said Millie in the kitchen as she cleared away the dishes. "How did you know?" asked Bob. "I was at the university for lunch with Tammy Myers. We thought you guys would come down to the cafeteria, but you didn't know." "No, Kevin and Clancy and I had some things to take care of," said Bob. "I can't talk about it, and neither can they, so please don't press any of them, Millie. No one can talk about this, for real. One day I'll tell you what it's all about, if I make it," he almost added, but caught himself in time. "But for now it just has to be like this. I'm sorry." "You're not going to Seattle on a secret investigation for the police, are you?" she asked, drying a dish. "No," he said. He owed her at least some smidgen of the truth. "I didn't think so. This is something else, something that happened when you were in Olympia for 2 weeks. Again, I can only tell you I'm sorry, Mill. It is what it is." "Yes, I know," said Millie with a nod. "I've known you for 8 years now, and I know you don't lie and you don't cheat. You met somebody in Olympia?" "Yes," he said. "There's a reason why I have to be involved. I can think of only one reason that would involve both you and the Myers. You're going out there to try and find that girl? The one who was stolen, the lost baby, Georgia. The one you and Kevin used to call Peanut?" "How do you figure that?" asked Bob. "You're a guardsman, you're not in Boss or any of the spook agencies, and yet somebody like that tapped you for whatever this is. There must be something special about you. Then you spend several hours huddled with the surviving relatives of a lost baby, so she must have something to do with it all. She hasn't come back, or I assume she'd be here in Missoula, and we'd be having her over to dinner to tell us about all her adventures in the mouth of hell. So she's still outside the Republic. My guess is that for some reason that has suddenly become important. You're going out there to collect her and bring her back." "Bring our little girl home, Bobby," Clancy Myers had asked him that afternoon, with tears in his eyes. "Please bring our little girl home. Dad, she's not our little girl anymore. Wherever she is, she's a grown woman now," Kevin told his father. "God knows what she's like after spending the last 12 years growing up with Amber and her fruitcake grandmother scrubbing her brain a nice bright pink. She may not want to come home, Dad, and we need to be ready for that." "No, Kevin, you don't get it," Clancy had said, shaking his head. "You will if Tammy's next baby is a daughter, though. Sons grow up and become men, but daughters are always your little girl, no matter what happens." "Damn, you should get your own detective shield," said Robert now to his wife, shaking his head in admiration. "Millie, straight up, keep all this to yourself. Loose lips here can get people killed." "No joke." "Including you?" asked Millie. "I'm not going to get killed, honey. This is just something that has to be done, and I'm the one who has to do it. I'll tell you when time and place shall serve, as Shakespeare said." Eli and Ed were harder to put off. "Good luck, son, whatever it is," his father-in-law told him, shaking his hand. "Any idea when you'll be back?" "Some months at least," he said. "Millie will be getting a call every couple of weeks from someone in Olympia just to tell her I'm okay, and it won't be a lie. They won't tell her anything else, but they won't lie to her, so if they say I'm all right, she can believe it. If anything happens to me, she'll be notified. Millie and the kids will stay here with us while you're gone." "Thanks, Eli," said Bob. "How likely is it that you're not coming back at all?" the old man asked him bluntly. "I just swore to Millie I plan on coming back," said Robert. "I mean to. But this is a delicate job and anything could happen." "Anything to do with this latest invasion scare?" asked Ed, now as tall and as powerful and dour as his father. "What invasion scare?" said Robert. "I haven't heard anything." "Bullshit," said Ed. "If not, you're the only one who hasn't," said Eli. "We do have a media in this country, and you're right, they don't tell us much on some things, but what they do tell us is straight up. Reservists being called up for extra training, including Ed here, Tommy's pioneer troop at the high school, getting sudden notice of a big nationwide exercise in June. All kinds of programs on TV about preparedness, stocking up on food and fuel and water. We can put 2 and 2 together." So they're finally coming for us from out there? There's always that chance, replied Bob carefully. Yeah, sure. Okay, you can't say. I get it. Eli looked him in the eye. All I can do is give you my word, Bob, that if America comes for those kids, they'll have to go through me first. And me, said Ed. Bob knew the story of the family's flight from Cicero, and he knew these strong and angry white men meant what they said. Thank you both. That's good for me to know. Later on that night, Robert Campbell stopped by his sister's house, the chancellor's official residence on campus. Jenny was getting her own children to bed, and then she came down and joined her brother and her husband in the living room. The once pretty girl had become a mature and beautiful matron of strength and dignity, and Jason was now entering an early middle age, which one understood would be the prime of his life. You know, I always envied the hell out of you two, Bobby confessed to them, although he'd said it before. The lives you led with the NVA. I was just a kid at the time, and I know that like most kids I was romanticizing danger and violence and terror into something it isn't. I've picked up that much in the cops. But now this thing has come up. I can't tell you any of the details, and I can't tell you why I of all people drew the short straw and got picked for this, but I guess you can figure out that I'm not going undercover to bust car thieves or burglary gangs in Seattle. I'm going out there, and it's going to be pretty hairy. The circus? Asked Jason. Yeah. I want to ask you too, how do you do it? How do you move and function and fight and survive in it all? I imagine it must be like a diver at the bottom of the sea in one of those old-fashioned suits with the brass helmet and the air hose, having to watch every step and make sure you don't get tangled or sucked into anything, but I don't really know what that means. How do you do it? How do you get the job done and come back alive? I have a lot to come back to. I know, said Jason sympathetically. Any tips? He asked. Rule number 1, said Jason. Stay focused, as psychobabblish as that sounds. Always be aware of your surroundings. Know where you are, know where everything is, know who is around you and where. When you go into a room, you register every single person in it, every exit, every object. Watch people. Every move they make, every word they say, every gesture, anything that marks them as a friend or a foe, or in most cases neither, just part of the shifting scenery. But you have to be able to tell the difference. You start drifting or daydreaming about Millie and the kids, and you'll end up lying on a gurney dressed in orange with a needle sticking in your arm, and they will never see you again. Never forget who you're supposed to be, said Jenny. Be that person. If you're supposed to be Cherry Cahoon, the trashed-out crack whore, you're Cherry the trashed-out junkie. If you're supposed to be Molly Hanson, the soccer jock chick, you're Molly Hanson down to your socks and your cleats. If you're supposed to be Louise Benteen, the junior U.S. attorney, you swing that briefcase right through the security check like you're Louise and no one else. Bob got the impression she wasn't just pulling names out of the air. If you just put on an act, if you're just playing a role, you'll forget your lines or slip up on a name or something that Cherry or Molly or Louise should know, and some gun thug will pick up on it. Keep your weapons clean as a whistle with just enough oil so they will function, said Jason. When you need it, you're going to need it in a split second, and a stoppage means death. Always carry a backup gun, something small like A, that will fit in an ankle holster or a pocket or even up your sleeve. Don't carry a knife unless you know what you're doing, and you can use it without a second's hesitation. Anytime you get a chance to go to the bathroom, take it, whether you need to or not, Jenny told him. Same thing with sleep. A revolutionary lives on cat naps, no drugs to stay awake, and don't touch a drop of booze while you're working, which is always. Any of this sound helpful at all? I guess, said Bob. I got all that in, well, I was taught, but mostly I just want to know how you did it year after year without going nuts. The two of them were quiet for a bit. Bob, Jason finally said, I'm not sure how to put this, but during those years, Jenny and I were both scared shitless most of the time. We were scared of death, we were scared of prison and the waterboard and the electrode and the Dershowitz needles, and above all, we were terrified that one of us would die and the other would have to live on, that this house and this life and those kids upstairs would never be. But the one thing we were never afraid of, not ever, was that we would lose. The NVA and the revolution were part of history, and we were part of the NVA and the revolution. It was who we were, and we were that because we knew that the survival of our race was the will of God, and that so long as we did His will as best we could, we would be sustained, and that someday it would be over, and the world would be right again. When you know that in your soul, as we did, then once you get out there you'll know what to do.